I thought if I kept my secrets buried, no one would notice. But my sister made one move that shattered the family. She opened a door, and behind it was not just my darkest nightmare, but a horrifying truth about our past. But who knew that one step would set off a chain of events leading to the most twisted ending? It was supposed to be one of those boring vacation days, the kind that was just another stop on the endless tourist trap circuit. Selfies, overpriced keychains, and pretending you care about stuff that's literally been in every Instagram story since 2014. Jamal, 28, was just along for the ride. He wasn't expecting much, but then again, when does life ever go as planned? He was trailing behind the tour group, his mind wandering, while the guide droned on about history that no one was really listening to. But then his eyes locked on something that stuck out like a sore thumb, an old, imposing government facility. It was tucked away behind thick metal gates, the kind you'd expect to see in a movie where some shady scientist is doing experiments to make the next world-ending weapon. You know, the good kind of conspiracy theory stuff. The kind you read about when you're deep into a Reddit hole, ignoring your responsibilities. "Yo, that place looks like it's hiding something," Jamal murmured, squinting at the building. He wasn't trying to whisper, but there was something in his tone that made it obvious this wasn't just another stop on the tour. Theo, his 30-year-old best friend and certified professional in sarcasm, shot him a sideways glance. "Man, stop being paranoid. It's probably just some boring government thing with a bunch of classified papers no one cares about. They don't let random dudes like us in there. You're acting like they've got aliens locked up in the basement or something." "Yeah, right," Jamal muttered under his breath. Theo had this habit of shutting down anything that wasn't immediately normal, and if it wasn't normal, he wasn't about to engage with it. Jamal, on the other hand, had always been drawn to the weird stuff, the things no one else wanted to know about. It was his thing. The more off-limits something was, the more he had to get involved. There was no ignoring it. The building was old, like hasn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades old. It looked like it belonged in a horror movie. The windows were so dirty, it was hard to tell if they were even windows anymore. And the doors? Yeah, they looked like they were still from World War II, the kind you'd expect to see in an old military bunker. The vibe screamed dangerous government secrets all over it. And if you know Jamal, you know that was exactly the type of vibe that drew him in like a moth to a flame. "Yo, I gotta check this out," he said, almost to himself. "This place looks like the kind of shit that could make me famous." Theo sighed, rolling his eyes. "Man, you're tripping. Chill out. We're on vacation. Let's just grab some overpriced snacks and keep it moving." But Jamal wasn't hearing it. Everyone else in the tour group had already wandered off to the gift shop, and this was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Screw the tour. Screw normal. He was already imagining how cool it would look on his feed, an exclusive tour of a government facility. If he could sneak in and get footage, he'd blow up. "Yeah, well," Jamal said, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention. "I'm gonna go check it out. You do you, but I'm doing this." Without waiting for a response, Jamal slipped through a hole in the fence like he'd done it 100 times. It wasn't the most graceful entry. There was definitely some scrambling involved, but in the end, he was in. And Theo? Yeah, Theo was standing on the other side of the fence, shaking his head like he couldn't believe it. "Yo, what the hell? You're gonna get caught!" Theo yelled, but Jamal was already inside, looking around like a kid in a candy store. The back door of the facility was unlocked. Classic. Jamal felt the rush. This was like playing the coolest video game ever. He crept through a dark corridor that smelled like oil and old machines, making his way deeper into the heart of the place. It felt like stepping into a relic, a forgotten piece of history that no one had bothered to clean up. It was like walking into the past. And honestly, it was exactly the kind of weird crap Jamal loved. He pulled out his phone, hit record, and streamed his every move to his private feed. This was going to be epic. "Yo, you won't believe this," Jamal said, his voice shaky but pumped. "I'm legit inside this place right now, and it's like a whole other world. Let's see what I can find, fam." The hallway was dim, the flickering overhead lights barely illuminating his way as he walked deeper into the facility. The walls seemed to close in, and Jamal could feel the weight of the place pressing down on him. Something was off, but that was exactly what made it so interesting. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. This was different than anything he'd ever done before. He was trespassing. He was crossing lines. He rounded a corner, and there it was, a massive steel door with BASIC etched into it. Yeah, basic. More like this is about to be anything but basic, Jamal thought, a smile creeping onto his face. He stepped forward, and before he could even think twice, his fingers hit the console next to the door. Click. The door groaned open, and the low hum of machinery filled the room. The air felt like it had been trapped for decades. Jamal couldn't believe what he was seeing. Inside the room, standing like a goddamn titan, was a robot. Not just any robot, either. It was huge, towering like a two-story building with sleek metallic armor and wires hanging out like it was some kind of Frankenstein's monster. Jamal's jaw hit the floor. This wasn't just a prototype or some science fair project. It was alive, and that's when everything went wrong. He couldn't help himself. He tapped the button again on the console, and the robot's eyes flickered on. The ground shook like an earthquake had just started, and the entire building seemed to rumble in response. The robot's limbs shifted, joints creaking as it started to move. Jamal's heart raced. "Oh shit, what the hell did I just do?" he whispered, his voice shaking. He backed away, but it was too late. The noise had already drawn the attention of the guards. They had no idea what was coming. As the robot came to life, the radio buzzed, chaos unfolding in real time. Jamal's phone lit up with a message from Theo. "I'm pretty sure I just woke up a combat robot. It's coming for me." Shit! The guards were scrambling to respond, but it was too late. The robot's massive limbs shifted again, and Jamal realized, with a sudden, cold clarity, that this wasn't a drill. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. The machine was walking toward the exit, and Jamal, standing there frozen in place, was about to be ground zero for one hell of a shitstorm. And then the robot stopped. It turned its head slowly, almost deliberately, and its glowing red eyes locked onto Jamal. Time froze for a split second. Jamal's heart stopped, and in that moment, he knew one thing. This was no longer a tourist trip. This was survival. It was coming for him. The moment the robot roared to life, it was like someone had flipped a switch in the universe, setting everything on fire. The sound was deafening, like a freight train smashing through a wall. Jamal didn't even have a second to process what was happening. Everything was happening way too fast. "Move, now!" Theo screamed, grabbing Jamal's arm and yanking him towards the exit. His grip was tight, his voice full of panic, but Jamal was too stunned to react. He felt his legs freeze up, like they were made of concrete. He didn't want to move, didn't want to think. But it was too late. The door slammed open with a force that rattled the walls, and the guards, who were trained for situations way more extreme than this, froze in place. Their faces paled as they saw the size of the robot lumbering towards them. These guys had handled riots, standoffs, even terrorist attacks. Hell, they'd probably seen it all. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared them for this. The combat robot was a nightmare made of metal. It moved like a damn juggernaut, its every step shaking the floor beneath Jamal's feet. It was like something out of a war zone movie. The thing was massive, towering over the guards like they were nothing more than ants in its path. The heavy metal creaking, the lights flickering. It was like the whole facility had just woken up to utter chaos. Jamal's head spun. He was stuck, frozen in place like a deer in headlights. His body was telling him to run, but his mind couldn't process it. This was real. This wasn't some crazy prank or stunt. This was war. What was he supposed to do? The fear was rising in his chest like a tidal wave. The blood rushed to his face. His palms were sweating. His heart? Yeah, it was in his throat, choking him with panic. What do I do? What do I do? "Get the hell back and let the mech units handle this," Sergeant Roy shouted, his voice cracking like it was his first time giving an order. Roy was the kind of guy who didn't break. Ever. But now, his usual confidence was shot to hell. He was panicking, and Jamal could feel it. It didn't help that the robot was now moving closer, its massive limbs shifting with terrifying precision. The guards scrambled like ants, trying to get into position, but this was a fight they couldn't win. Not against a beast that could literally crush a tank. Jamal's brain was fried. He had no plan. There was no backup, no escape route. And yet, somehow, a part of him felt like he was on the verge of something huge. He couldn't leave now. He'd made it this far. He had to see what happened next. But his feet weren't following his thoughts. He turned and bolted down the narrow corridor. The air was thick with fear and adrenaline as the metallic monster stomped after him, each footstep shaking the floor beneath him. He glanced over his shoulder just long enough to see the terror in the guards' eyes. They were trying to get in position to fight back, but it was like watching ants try to stop a bulldozer. "Damn it, Theo," Jamal shouted, spinning around. His heart pounded harder when he realized his buddy wasn't behind him. It wasn't clear if Theo had bailed or just couldn't keep up, but he was gone. Jamal was alone now, just him and his out-of-control live stream. He could feel the robot's steps pounding closer, and his instincts screamed for him to run faster. This was real, this was happening, and there was no way out. Jamal sprinted down the corridor, his legs burning with effort, but his mind was spinning. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a notification from the media team. His live stream had gone viral. The robot, Jamal's face, the chaos, it was everywhere. Jamal didn't even have the mental space to freak out about it. He was too busy running for his life. But somehow, he knew. He knew that this wasn't just some viral stunt anymore. This was a disaster unfolding in real time. And millions of people were watching. The Royal Guard had finally arrived, but it was too late. They were outgunned and outmatched. The robot wasn't listening to anyone. It was moving on its own protocols, and those protocols, they were designed for one thing, to destroy everything in its path. Jamal stumbled through the hallway, his chest heaving with every breath. His mind was a mess of panic and disbelief. What the hell had he done? What had triggered this? Was this all a mistake? Or had he just unleashed something far bigger than he ever imagined? And then it got worse. The Royal Guard? Yeah, they weren't prepared for this. They thought they were walking into a rescue mission, but they had no idea that the robot wasn't just some malfunctioning machine. No, this thing was military grade. It was built for destruction. Jamal had no clue what it was capable of. Nobody did. He could hear the robot's movements growing closer, the roar of its engines mixing with the screams and chaos of the guards. The tension in the air was palpable, thick as smoke. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a race against time. The guards had no way to stop it. Jamal had no idea what to do. But he wasn't ready to just die without finding out what the hell was going on. The world outside? They were watching the whole thing. The live stream had turned into a global spectacle, and Jamal, in the middle of it all, had no idea whether to laugh or cry. He was living in a nightmare, but his followers were living for the drama. In the midst of it all, Jamal had one thought ringing through his mind. If I make it out of here alive, I'm going to have one hell of a story. But right now, all he could think about was survival, and survival meant one thing: getting the hell out before the metal monster turned him into a pancake. The chaos was unreal. Jamal could feel the tension crawling under his skin, a prickling sensation as the whole world seemed to collapse into one massive disaster. The Royal Guard was outmatched. They were scrambling to prevent total destruction, but no one had a plan for what was happening now. The combat robot? It was more than just a piece of machinery. It was a symbol of a system so messed up that even the most well-trained guards couldn't stop it. This wasn't about tech anymore. It was about power. And power, Jamal realized, was something that could never be controlled by a few dozen trained soldiers. As he sprinted through the halls, phone in hand, the live stream still running, Jamal could hear the relentless clash of metal against metal. The sound was deafening. The floor shook beneath him as the robot continued to plow through the facility. The Royal Guard, they were trying their best to hold it back, but it was clear they were out of their depth. They couldn't stop it. This thing, this machine, was designed to destroy, and it wasn't even breaking a sweat. Jamal's stomach churned as the reality of the situation finally hit him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just witnessing chaos. He had caused it. The realization settled deep in his gut. His curiosity, his need for answers, had triggered something far bigger than he ever imagined. He wasn't just running for his life anymore. He was part of a bigger, darker story. A story that wasn't just about him making a stupid decision. It was about the system that had allowed this robot to exist in the first place. And now, that same system was unraveling before his eyes. The media had already caught on. Jamal's phone buzzed with notifications. News outlets were speculating about the government's involvement, claiming that the robot was somehow tied to a covert military project. The conspiracy theories were flying, and Jamal, he was at the center of it all. He felt a deep, gnawing guilt building inside him. It wasn't just the robot he'd unleashed. It was the whole damn system. The guards were just doing their jobs, but they were being crushed by the very thing they were supposed to protect. And that's when it hit him, the gut punch he hadn't seen coming. The Royal Guard wasn't supposed to win. They were never supposed to win. They were pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing. And that game, it was a game of control, a game where the players were all part of something much larger than themselves. Jamal's mind raced as he watched the final showdown unfold in real time. The Royal Guard, despite their training and their weapons, were nothing but puppets in the hands of a system that had already decided the outcome. And Jamal? He was no different. He had started this whole mess, and now he was stuck in the middle of a fight that wasn't about right or wrong. It was about survival. It was about questioning everything. He didn't even know if he could survive this. But one thing was clear, the live stream had to stay live. The world had to know what was going on. The truth about the combat robot, about the people behind it, had to come out. Jamal had no idea what was going to happen next, but one thing was certain, the story wasn't over. As the last remaining guard, Sergeant Roy, attempted to dismantle the robot, fighting back with everything he had left, Jamal couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. This wasn't just a battle against a robot. This was a battle against a system that had been in place long before any of them had stepped foot inside the facility. And no matter what happened next, the consequences would be far worse than any metal fist could ever dish out. Jamal's hands trembled as he kept his phone steady, streaming the chaos to the world. He knew the truth about what was happening in that building, and he wasn't going to let it be buried. The guards, the government, the robot, they were all part of something bigger than any of them realized. But Jamal wasn't about to back down. As the last line of defense crumbled and the robot advanced, Jamal made a choice. The live stream would stay live. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. The consequences would hit harder than any punch from that damn robot. But that was just the beginning of a story that Jamal wasn't sure he was ready to finish. But like everything else in his life at this point, it wasn't up to him anymore. The game had changed, and now the world was watching. And they were all about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole really went. The game had changed, and Jamal was just trying to stay in it. If I were in Jamal's shoes, I'd probably freeze up at first too. Who wouldn't? You're in the middle of something way bigger than you expected. But then I think the guilt would kick in hard. I'd want to find a way to undo what I did. But knowing it's already out there, all I could do is keep the truth flowing, like Jamal did. The live stream, I'd make sure it didn't stop. The world needs to see what's happening. And yeah, it's easy to say I'd stop running and try to fix things, but when you're in the middle of chaos, it's all about survival. Have any of you been in a situation where you started something not knowing how big it would get? Ever felt like you unleashed something that you couldn't take back? Drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. If you've got a similar experience, share it. Let's learn from each other. Don't forget to like and share. Let's get the story out there. It's not just about robots and chaos. It's about the bigger issues we're all dealing with. It's time we shed light on those systems that control us. Your opinion matters. This story is for good. It's to bring awareness, to highlight problems, and to make the world a little bit better. Keep the conversation going.